make sure that we have everybody we need. I do have 5:01, but I think we need to hang out a little bit longer. We have just 5 members here.
I don't think Nat's joining us, Mary. I think he's
Right.
trapped.
Right. Thank you, Dave. That's correct. We do have 6. I guess I should go ahead with the script and hopefully we'll get other members to join in the meantime. So good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission for Monday, April 24th is convening by a video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating remotely via Zoom. The meeting link is included in the agenda posted on the town's website. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Please be aware other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your screen. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or who acts inappropriately. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Use the raise hand feature in Zoom to indicate you'd like to offer a comment. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to Megan Trudell to be read into the meeting record. Her email is mtrudell@nantucket-ma.gov. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members are present, all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Seth Engelborg?
Here.
Christy Ferrantella?
Here.
I do not see Don Holgate or Wendy Hudson, so Dave Iverson?
Here.
I don't see Bert Johnson. We know that Nat Lowell's not able to join us. Barry Rector?
Here.
Joe Topham?
Here.
John Trudell?
Here.
And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Andrew Vorse?
Here.
Leslie Snell?
Here.
Megan Trudell?
Here.
Mike Burns?
Here.
And Raisa Kwame from Mass DOT?
Here.
Okay, I don't know if we have any anticipated speakers on the agenda, so finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. The first item on the agenda then is the approval of the agenda. And I want to note just for public information that we have both public comment and then we also have a discussion of the NPNEDC mission. So that will allow the public to participate. So if you have comments regarding the NPNEDC mission, you can save those for that discussion. Otherwise, public comment would be as usual. So do we have any other notes on the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda, Madam Chair.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
John Trudell,
Aye.
Barry Rector.
Aye.
Sorry, Barry, took you a little out of order there.
It's all right.
So the agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to offer a comment at this time? Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And Megan, let us know if you have seen anybody there.
I'm not seeing anyone with a hand raised.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of February 23rd. So thank you to the minute taker who did such a detailed job. I do have two small corrections. They're both on page 9. And that is for clarification only. There's a sentence, we have a new plan from Monomoy and a new plan from a town area. That's actually the town area, the town area plan. So that could be confusing. So I wanted to clarify that. And I sent that note to Megan. And then further down on the page, towards the bottom, we have a note saying, again, for me, I think we should be thinking about, and also the MIU should be mentioned. That should be the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement. So just a couple of typos there to fix. Any other notes on the February 23rd minutes? If there are none, we'll take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
John. Thank you, Seth, for second. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
John Trudeau,
Aye. Is that her?
yeah, and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is public comment. No, sorry, I'm going backwards. So the open space and recreation plan follow-up. Andrew, do you have more to tell us on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to give you all a quick update, met with the select board on the open space plan, and the public hearing to adopt that was continued to May 10th. So it will be an agenda item before them by then. There was some, I guess I would describe it as positive feedback and sort of negative, unnecessary feedback. In regard to the positive feedback, we heard people expressing an interest in inclusion of indoor recreation in the plan as a specific item. Indoor recreation is referenced in the plan, but perhaps not as directly as some would like it. So we have met with with people who spoke at the meeting and plan on getting that revised, which I don't think changes the overall. There were some issues about updating some figures that, again, as you know, this was continued several times from its draft period in 2019. So there were some certain references that needed to be updated. And there was some discussion about the survey. I think, in one sense, it was sort of not recognized that it was a 2022 survey that went out, not a 2018. There was both a 2018 and a 2022 to update that. So there was discussion about further outreach, and that really, our recommendation is that needs to be broken into a further action item in the plan. One of the key parts of the plan is that the goals and objectives are reviewed and updated on a 6-month period with really the key stakeholders. And that is something I did have a discussion with the town manager about, that going forward, the open space plan is really in the wheelhouse of at least 2 departments. The Conservation Commission is one, and the Park and Recreation Group is another, in addition to the Land Bank. I mean, those are the 3 sort of public entities that really are the primary, I guess, beneficiaries of that plan as it moves forward. Our effort, as you know, was to get this plan to the point where it would return the town to some eligibility for some of the grant funding that's available. And again, if that's not a priority of the town, then they don't have to have a finalized open space plan. I think that based on the conversations that I have, it is and certainly should be a priority to get to that point. And I'm very hopeful that on May 10th, we will proceed and have that plan submitted for final review. That's all I have for that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions from commissioners? So Andrew, we're anticipating then on May 10th, we'd request that the select board adopt the plan with the revisions that you mentioned, and then to implement some of the action steps that were most directly commented on. Is that what we're doing?
So, and the action plan again would include some specific timelines to look, at the indoor recreation activity, in detail, to conduct further outreach efforts in different languages. That's something that was mentioned. All of that was very positive, and it's something that I think, should continue on during the next, that plan has a 7-year life, as you know, so it will be spelled out as specific goals over the next 7-year period.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Do you need a motion from us? Is this just an update at this point?
Would love a motion from you, because I do think that we've spent a lot of time with this, and I would like to see this move towards completion. I think you all agree with me on that.
Mhm.
Seth?
I will move to request the select board officially adopt the open space and recreation plan as amended at their May 10th meeting.
Thank you, Seth. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm going to take Joe as a second on that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Roll call vote. Seth Engelborn,
Aye.
Lucy Barantella,
Aye.
and I'll note Wendy Hudson joined us at 5:08. Wendy?
Aye.
Steve Iverson?
Aye.
Jerry Rector?
Aye.
Joe Topham?
Aye.
John Trudell?
Aye.
Mayor Longacre, aye. Thank you. Update from the Transportation Program Manager. Mike, welcome back, and you have a big PowerPoint for us. A lot going on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to share my screen. So deep breath and cross your fingers. Let me know if you're seeing.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to go through a few of our 3C programming documents. As you know, it's 3C season where we go through the TIP, UPWP, and the Long Range Transportation Plan. As most of you know, and just to preface everything, I do have material in the meeting packet with the script for this presentation. I will note that the motions are a little different since our May meeting is getting rescheduled to an alternative date. So I'll just be sure to note that when we go to it to make sure that the motion is clear. But as I was saying, most of you know the continuing comprehensive cooperative planning process for transportation, also known as the 3C planning process, primarily involves development of 3 programming documents, the TIP, UPWP, and the Long Range Transportation Plan. I'll briefly review the role of each document here. First, the Long Range Transportation Plan includes a 20+ year vision for transportation improvements or investments and is updated every 4 years by statute. Next, the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is a 5-year schedule of highway and transit investments identified in the Long Range Transportation Plan, which is updated every year. And the UPWP, or Unified Planning Work Program, is an annual listing of planning activities using federal and state funding that aligns with the region's transportation plan and vision, and it is also updated every year. And as this graphic demonstrates, all of these documents should be informed through public participation, as described in the region's public participation plan. And these investments ultimately do live in the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP. And we'll talk about those as we go along here. The next set of slides describe each of the programming documents that need to be developed in the coming months. A brief summary of each, along with the necessary outreach, is provided, along with requested actions. First is the TIP, which includes 2 items, one to amend the current TIP and to provide next year's TIP for public review. As mentioned, the TIP is a physically constrained listing of federal and state funded regional transportation projects for the next 4 or 5 years. 5 years is the timeframe used by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. This is federally required and includes both roadway and transit projects, which ultimately are programmed in the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, as I mentioned. And from time to time, these documents need to be amended to add projects or just to make modifications to the scope and or costs. The transit program for fiscal year 2023 needs to be amended in the current tip to add a project for a supervisory vehicle, reduce the costs of a maintenance project, add funding for traveler information systems, maintenance and shop equipment, and add funding for a bus replacement. The public review of this tip amendment is requested to start following this month's meeting on Friday, April 28th, with action for approval by this body, the NPDC, at the May 22nd meeting. Noticing will be done as described in the public participation plan, which includes e-blasts via the town's communication staff, hard copies being provided at the Athenaeum, the town building, and the planning office, and the notice and signature sheets for this amendment are included in this meeting's packet. Again, the requested action: authorize a public review period for an amendment to the federal fiscal year 2023 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program from April 28th to May 22nd, 2023, within a public meeting for discussion and action on May 22nd at 5 p.m.
Any questions for Mike on this item? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is the time or not, but in the amendment related to the replacement of the bus, I'm wondering if there's any, preliminary looking into like trying to get an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, or is that within the scope of what we're doing here? Or is that later in the process?
Nick?
Madam Chair, I will say that there is a need for bus replacements. I believe there is an effort underway to acquire propane vehicles and replace the fleet with propane vehicles. That hasn't been finalized yet. Procurement is still underway. I couldn't really speak to the specifications of this particular vehicle that's being replaced. If it's all right, I can make sure that the NRTA administrators at the next meeting to go over any technical questions of the vehicle replacements and can elaborate on the types of fuel that are being used. All I can say is that there is an effort to go with an alternative fuel. I can't really speak to anything beyond that.
Thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you. And if I may, Madam Chair, I would just, personally, if you could relay that those alternatives are preferable, maybe that's not a whole NB and EDC decision, but in my opinion, it's good to start adopting that technology as soon as possible.
And I don't think we have had the NRTA new administrator at one of our meetings yet. So perhaps that's something we can arrange for next month for a number of reasons.
We'll try to work on that. I know, just like me, there's a lot of catch up being done with new staff getting on board, but yeah, that would be very helpful to answer questions like this.
Great. So did you need the motion now, Mike? If there are no other questions?
Yes, please.
All right, so we have the motion on the screen. Do we have someone willing to offer that?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Christy. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Barry. Roll call vote. Seth Engelberg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Steve Iverson,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Chapham,
Aye.
and Trudell.
Aye.
Didn't quite forget Wendy Hudson, but I did get her out of order.
Aye.
Thank you, Wendy, and Mary Longover, aye. Please continue, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the next set of items describe the programming documents that need updating in the coming months. A brief summary of each, along with the necessary outreach is provided, along with requested actions. First is the tip for fiscal years, the next tip for fiscal years 2024 to 28. The highway program of the federal fiscal year 24 to 28 tip includes two projects. In fiscal year 24, improvements are proposed at the intersection of Milestone Road at Pulpus Road with an extension of a shared use path from the Pulpus path to the Matamoy Road intersection. The current cost to be programmed is 1.2 million, which includes over 1 million in federal funding and 120,000 in state matching funds from both the statewide and regionally prioritized highway programs. That's why there's two listings here. There's two different programs that we're drawing from. No local funds are programmed, although regional transportation planning funding has been used in the past to study this intersection in the project area. Identified issues include high speeds with insufficient sight lines, numerous points of conflict due to the Y configuration of the intersection, and insufficient and unsafe access and crossing for active transportation users. The purpose of this project is to improve intersection operations and safety through the design and construction of a new intersection configuration. The project will also include the construction of a shared use path, as I mentioned, on the north side of Milestone Road between Monomoy and the existing Pulpus bike path for approximately 1,600 feet to improve safety and accessibility for all users. As a result of Nantucket's support and preliminary work to advance this improvement, Mass DOT would assume the design responsibilities and advance the project development process. As the project advances, Mass DOT will coordinate with the town to determine priorities and potential phasing depending on available funds. In fiscal year 2025, a shared use path is proposed along Walnut Road. This project is funded with a combination of Federal Land Access Program or FLAP funding, as well as local funding. For this fiscal year, 2025, the funding program represents a recently approved FLAP grant application, which is the third grant awarded for this project. And as you know, the project will address safety, connectivity, and support active transportation and sustainable mobility. The path will be approximately 2 miles in length and connect to the Pulpus Road path to the gatehouse at the end of Walnut Road. This project was recommended by a study by the U.S. Department of Transportation and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and both projects are identified in the region's long-range transportation plan. The transit program includes various projects for fiscal year 2024, such as operations, maintenance of vehicles, fare box equipment, and travel information systems. There's also anticipated expenses for propane fueling equipment to accommodate anticipated new propane fueled vehicles, just getting on the issue we talked about under the last item. Don't have much detail beyond that. I will note that in 2025, these items include similar expenses for operations and maintenance of vehicles and facilities. In 2026, this year includes similar projects for operations and maintenance. Maintenance of support vehicles is not included in this particular fiscal year. In 2027, this year does not yet include operational expenses. That's the cost of operating the buses for the drivers and whatnot. Those expenses are usually only projected out for a few years, so some of the outer years are not captured here, although other typical asset management projects are included. And then in 2028, this is very similar to the fiscal year of 2027 for transit projects. The public review of this tip is requested to start following this month's meeting on Friday, April 28th, with approval authorized by the NPDC at the May 22nd meeting. Noticing will be done as described in the public participation plan and includes e-blast via the town's communication staff. Hard copies are provided at the Athenaeum, town building and planning office. There is a draft tip in your meeting materials, and the requested action is to authorize a public review period for the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program from April 28th to May 22nd, 2023, with a public meeting for discussion and action on May 22nd at 5 p.m.
Any comments or questions from commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Joe? Yep.
Thank you. Mike, through Madam Chair to Mike. So my understanding is that the propane buses are very difficult to get, and there was a grant for that. but I was told that there might be something where you're trying to get electric buses. So where that has kind of been pigeonholed, you're also looking at having LP, supplies at the Wave offices. But does that, if it changed to solar, is that money still earmarked for LP, or is that something that could shift easier than the grant that was given for the LP buses? And I know that you're getting up to speed, but that was something I was told.
No, Madam Chair, he's correct that the propane vehicles are a little hard to get a hold of. That's why I mentioned there are procurement issues. That decision hasn't been made yet, whether funding can be used towards electric vehicles or whether we're going to go with electric instead of the propane. My understanding is there's going to be a second effort to procure propane vehicles since it was so difficult to do the first round. But that's kind of in limbo right now, so I really can't say beyond that. Perhaps at our May meeting, the NRTA administrator, if he's available, could elaborate on the status of just which fuel vehicle we're going to use for the buses going forward, which seems to have the most potential of.
Mike, is there any value to replacing in these documents once they're approved, to replace the word propane with non-gasoline or non-diesel fuels to allow a wider range of options?
I think the technicality, and again, I might be talking out of bounds here. The either low emissions or zero emission vehicles. I think those are the two categories you want to pick. I think the issue with the funding is that the propane was listed under a low emission category rather than zero emission category. So we could get clarification on the future. I'm just going to need to get clarification of how Mass DOT, unless Raisha would like to wants to clarify that for me, just how those are handled in these programming documents, because we do want to have flexibility and not overburden the procurement process and leave some flexibility there. But I for that level of technical question, I don't know if I can clarify it any more than there's low emission and zero emission, and then the standard less than
maybe that's the phrasing we want rather than propane is low emission. Raisa, do you have anything you can add to clarify?
So hi everyone. So based on my understanding, Mike is correct with the terminology. However, I'd probably have to verify that information after the meeting just to confirm.
Great, thank you. Other comments or questions from commissioners? Yes, Joe?
I just think all the language should be consistent throughout all the, documents going forward, if we could do that. And I know, Mike, that you're kind of in a tough bind trying to figure all that out, but I just don't want the first part to be a mistake and then we keep tagging on to that. So that's why I was just asking for a correction or more information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so these documents are being released for public comment, and certainly at the next meeting we have the opportunity to edit them based on public comment or our own suggestions. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Did we do them? No, we need a motion as shown on the screen to authorize the public review period. Joe, are you making that motion?
Yeah, motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Christy, for the second. Roll call vote. Seth Engelbart,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Lee Hudson,
Aye.
Steve Iverson,
Aye.
Jerry Rector,
Aye.
Topham,
Aye.
John Trudell,
Aye.
Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you. All right, Mike, next up.
Next is to introduce the budget and review period for the federal fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. As mentioned, the UPWP is a physically constrained listing of federal and state funded regional transportation planning activities for the upcoming year. This federally required programming document is updated annually and includes all administrative, data collection, analytical, planning, and implementation activities for the coming year. These activities must align with federal, state, and local vision goals and priorities. As mentioned, all activities for a continuing comprehensive and cooperative planning process are included. The standard grants management, data collection, and implementation tasks are reoccurring each year, as are the planning activities. Planning priorities for this year include development of the safe streets and roads for all action plan, as well as various transit planning activities such as updating the transit asset management plan and other transit planning activities. There's also strategic and long range planning tasks. There's going to be some effort to align long range planning activities with the town's strategic planning efforts going forward this next year. The 3C grants for fiscal year 24 provides a budget of over $324,000. A brief itemized budget is provided in this table. Management activities in task 1 include the 3C grant administration, TIP and UPWP development, and other coordination tasks. For this year, additional budget is added to task 2 for data collection for performance management activities that align with state and perhaps even local or regional performance measures. Tasks 3 and 4, the planning and implementation activities, are similar to previous work programs and account for about 55% of the total budget. These include the grants that are managed include the flat grants, the Safe Streets and Roads for All action plan, a complete streets grant, and includes time for syncing the town strategic planning efforts with the long range planning efforts, as I noted. A public review for this work program and budget is anticipated to start following next month's May 22nd meeting with approval at the June 26th meeting. Noticing, as with the TIP, will be done as described in the public participation plan. There is no requested action this month, although I can answer any questions about the budget or time frame if there are any.
Comments or questions from commissioners? Seeing none, go ahead, Mike, to the next item.
Sure thing. Lastly, this item is to introduce the updating strategy for the long range transportation plan. The LRTP helps achieve the mission of the NPDC. For those who don't know, the LRTP is a federally required, physically constrained long range planning document updated every 4 years that guides major transportation investments for at least the next 20 years or 2050 for this planning cycle. This plan describes the region's vision, goals, and implementation strategies. It also described the current conditions and desired future transportation system. The graphic on the right is the cover of the current LRTP that will expire at the end of September, which is the deadline for this planning effort. And to go into the scheduling, the updating strategy being presented at this meeting follows a 3-phased approach of visioning, prioritization, and public review. It also includes the NPDC conducting 5 public meetings to review the plan material. The first step of the LRTP updating process will be the visioning phase to review the vision, goals, and existing conditions. The May 22nd meeting will be used to focus on these areas and provide guidance to finalize content for the June 22nd meeting. June 26th meeting. The June 26th meeting will be used to finalize the vision and goals and to begin reviewing priorities based on vision and goals. This will kick off the prioritization phase, which will gather feedback on any big ideas and investment strategies for the vision. The July 17th meeting will be used to finalize priorities and release the draft plan for public review. A public review phase will last at least 21 days and conclude at the August 21st meeting, which will serve to review and collect additional public comments received. And the long-range transportation plan will need to be approved by the NPDC along with any final edits to the draft at this August 21st meeting to meet that deadline. And staff will make every attempt to gather public input using the town's Zen City public outreach platform to share recorded presentations, collect survey responses, and provide opportunities to comment on draft material. And just for an example, here's an example of the beloved peacock graphic used by the Houston-Galveston region that I actually helped recently update. The overarching vision used for this example is at the top, and at the point of this spectrum of goals are the desired outcomes in simple terms. A safe, resilient, reliable and equitable multimodal transportation system that contributes to a livable region. This is the succinct vision of what the system in that region would aspire to be by 2045. The goals explicitly included federal performance measures and planning factors with which the plan is required to align. The desired outcomes, which include 0 fatalities and facilities in good condition, these use simple metrics in layman's terms to help the public understand the long-term intents. And this example of a surreal vision provided in red, along with the goals, directly informed the priority planning activities shown here on the left in bold. These are for safety, reliability, resiliency, equity, using analytics for a data-informed process to ensure livability. And again, livability is defined by providing mode choice and services within proximity of activity centers. And lastly, the hook of this vision was that a surreal vision needs you. So there is an investment effort for more public participation techniques. Again, this is just an example. And what is the Nantucket region's vision? This is our current vision at the top in black. An alternative wording is provided here in red that may provide a more succinct way of saying that a safe, accessible, and economical transportation system with vehicle limitations that is sensitive to the character of the island. This is what the Nantucket region currently would like the transportation to be in 2050. The current plan also offers 9 mechanisms for achieving that vision. It includes vehicle restrictions, using a development pattern of town and country, providing an array of multimodal transportation options, pursuing parking management, providing wayfinding for the general public. Topics of resiliency and reliability are included, along with transportation between the mainlands, as well as congestion and safety balancing, and environmental and historic sensitivity. That sounds like a lot because it is. For conceptual purposes, here are those same 9 goal areas or mechanisms on the left. These have been modified slightly based on planning factors noted in the arrows to be more succinct. And let me add those arrows in there. These 6 goals then align with suggested desired outcomes. These are provided for discussion purposes that will assist staff in developing a strategy for public outreach. Starting at the top of the middle column, this goal suggests prioritizing reliability to, from, and around the islands. Next, ensure equitable investment through outreach with prioritized investment in all modes of transportation within the town overlay. Then strengthening the economy through reliable freight movement, connected paths, and frequent transit operations, and turnover of on-street parking downtown. That would be the economic goal. Next, investments should contribute to a resilient system and a state of good repair. And then lastly, regarding safety, achieve 0 fatalities by 2050. Lastly, minimizing impacts to the natural and cultural environment. There was an arrow there. I miss, apologies for that. And again, the updating strategy is extremely ambitious. We're on a very tight timeline. In my last position, updating the transportation plan was a 2-year process. We're trying to do this in 3 or 4 months now here. The next meeting will be May 22nd to focus on the vision goals and briefly review conditions of the system. This phase will wrap at the June 26th meeting and then focus on the list of recommended projects for funding, as well as illustrative investments that we just can't afford right now. And again, staff will make every effort to gather public input using the town's Zen City outreach platform to share recorded presentations, collect input via survey responses, and provide opportunities for other comments on draft material. And Madam Chair, as you know, the I think that's it. Again, the proposed public review period is from July 21st for the transportation plan and would end August 21st, 2023 to meet our September deadline. And again, no actions requested this month, but I'm happy to answer any of the questions that I flew over the topics of vision and goals. But this is kind of the opportunity now to, I guess, take the temperature of the room and see if there was any like, dislike to the movement towards a succinct vision, succinct goals, and using this strategy of desired outcomes.
Thank you, Mike. Would you scroll back in the presentation to that alternative wording that you presented? And John, you can go ahead with a question.
This is more specific, Mike, so I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask this or a future meeting. But years ago, and this was when you were here before you had left, and I'm happy you're back, we had discussed Milestone Road. And in looking at the plan that is going to be revised and updated at the Island Lumber there, we had originally looked at a potential for a roundabout there. We are obviously still looking at the rotary being updated. Further on down in Tom Nevers, we had the Tom Nevers Road changed and updated to be a little bit more safer. And I guess what I'm getting at is at some point for long-term planning, we had talked about a roundabout in the Noble Deer Farm Road milestone connection for a few reasons. Number one, safety when you have people pulling out of there, when you have people traveling down Milestone Road, slowing down to a point where the roundabout is, and also allowing traffic to flow a little bit more easily into that roundabout, because traffic is really not only getting backed up, it does back up over half the distance of Noble Deer Farm Road. And I was just wondering if that is something that we're going to be looking at long-term in a long-range planning. And, you know, if you can answer or I can continue, but grants and things like that, I'm happy to say I've been very optimistic on upon your return with any kind of grant writing and money that we've been leaving on the table for years. I'm hoping that the grant writing and funds from the state and the federal government are coming through back on schedule as we hope they would.
Hey, Mike.
Madam Chair, I can say that at least in the current plan, as I understand it, those improvements are included in the long-range transportation plan. So whether there's funding to actually construct those or not, that's why I mentioned that we might include them in what's called an illustrative list. That's a list of projects that there is support for, there's just not funding for, and that's even over the 20-year period. So we can talk about where that project, those intersection projects are in that list and in the priority in the coming months. I will say that a roundabout configuration was the recommendation for safety, congestion, and air quality reasons. There is that project at Pulpus and Milestone Road. Raisha could tell you that there is an engineering directive from the head of Mass DOT, the lead engineer, I can't remember his title, to actually evaluate roundabouts with any intersection improvement, just to look at the feasibility of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the recommendation that's advanced, but it at least needs to be considered because of the safety, congestion, and air quality benefits of roundabouts. I think to answer your question shortly, yes, it is in the plan. It can be considered.
That's refreshing to hear. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Other comments or questions? So, Mike, you're looking for us at our next meeting to discuss and adopt the alternative wording and vision. Is that correct? You're not looking for us to do that today?
Some direction would be nice at this meeting. If you would like to set a work group up or something like that to go over the material in the meantime between now and the next meeting, that would be great. But again, I believe at the June meeting, we can continue discussion in May, but at the June meeting, that really does, if to meet this ambitious timeline, that really does need to be kind of finalized by that June meeting date.
Okay, further comments or questions? direction
Chair.
for Mike? Yes, Andrew?
Just wanted to underscore what Mike said about the timeline, because we are operating with a deadline here, and I want to just, make sure the board understands, the commission understands that, there's not going to be time to sort of, similar to the open space plan, to just, let things go, that basically we have a fairly tight timeline here, and the effort to get public participation and everything has to occur within this to meet that September deadline, which is I know Mike knows that it's tight, but this is the hand that he's been dealt, and this is what has to happen to meet it. So I just want to be clear about that, for those who are interested in this, you really will need to put time into doing and providing comments in conjunction with the schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Further comments or questions from commissioners? All right, well, it'll be a transportation summer.
It usually is, isn't it? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Right, so that concludes the Transportation Program Manager update portion of the agenda. Our next discussion is on the NP&EDC mission, and there was included in the package a draft statement. This is a result of the comments that Seth and Barry and I provided at the last meeting. We got together and tried to put all that into one succinct package. This is not the full extent of those comments. This is the area where we felt that we had good agreements and wanted to bring it forward at this time to the other commissioners and also to the planning department for their review and comments. So this is still very much a draft. Just to run through this quickly, the first section that will be updated by the Plus department as to the exact legislation, dates and times and so on. That's pretty boilerplate. We are suggesting a name change in the first sentence. We'll come back to that. Then the scope of authority was rewritten. Vision is a new statement, and the mission is 2 bullet points that further elaborate on the vision. Barry or Seth, do you want to chime in at this point? I guess not.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair.
Barry can go.
No, go ahead, Seth. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Barry. I think ultimately we're going to try to take those 2 mission bullet points and combine them into something cohesive. And there is likely going to be a further development of this to include specific objectives. We're not sure if that will get into the legislative update or it will be an internal document, but we will get into more specific actions and procedures in that piece.
Barry?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few things you should really take note of. The enabling legislation, as Mary said, it is really a boilerplate thing. The only thing that is new in there is just starting to call the commission something different. The 3 of us sat down and we kind of banged our heads together a bit about that. And this is where we kept circling back to. It doesn't mean that it can't be changed again, but I would, we kind of really need to move ahead with this. This is not a document that we want to be languishing on in any way, shape, or form. So I'm tempted to start asking people, what are your thoughts? Where do you want to take this? And personally, I would love to be able to start closing out pieces of what we need to do with this. So for instance, like with the scope of authority, if you're good with that, I would love to hear that as a commission, we're good with that. We're ready to go. Let's lock and load that. With the vision statements, same thing again. Doesn't mean we can't go back and change it, but I think it's important now to start taking these areas and saying, okay, we either need significant work on it or we're good with what it is. Let's keep moving ahead. There's a fairly good workload that still is sitting before us. But I for one really would say it's time to start wrapping things up here and moving into the next phase so that we can finally get this out to the state for approval. I'd love to hear some feedback from some of the commissioners. And one last thing I'm going to tell you is that we did work very hard on starting to draft out objectives, which really takes a lot of what you see here and fleshes things out further. We're going to try to meet in the next few days just to hammer this out a bit further with the objectives. Just speaking personally at this point, I think what would be good is that once maybe we're done with that document, that we circulate it out to the commissioners and see if there are things you want to add, subtract, whatever, so that at our May meeting, we're pretty close to where we need to be with those as well too. This is a lot of work, and it's fascinating that we've been able to take what we've had out there and condense it down to this level. But short and sweet is good here in terms of the next phase of what we want to do with things. Yeah, the final part too is, again, just making sure that we settle on our name. And then the other lofty task will be, who do we want on the commission? How many commissioners?
Right. Let's leave some things for the future.
No, but
We need to
again,
get-
I'm just saying though, there are certain tasks that are before us at this point. And I think, again, like I said, I for one don't want to be languishing on this in any way, shape, or form. So this is just a look into the crystal ball of where I think we need to head with things. So
Thank you, Barry.
anyways,
So I'll add a little bit of my personal perspective. To me, that it's important that the commissioners do have the opportunity to weigh in. And this is the first time that you've seen this today. So it is really up to you whether or not you think that this is either editable or polished enough that we adopt it. But I'm certainly open to people having a different opinion. My feeling on the mission is that those two statements probably want to stay separate, because I think they're focused, one internally within our region and one externally outside of our region. And so I do have a small edit on the last bullet. I think we're using the word region to mean two different things. So when we say the NRPC serves as an advocate for Nantucket within the region, I think what we really mean is outside the Nantucket region. And I'll ask Barry and Seth if they agree with that interpretation. I just wanted to offer that clarification because, again, this is the first time that the other commissioners have seen this.
Yes, I agree. And I'm happy to cede the floor to the other commissioners.
yeah, and I think maybe what will clarify, maybe just changing the word region to state.
Well, this is part of the debate that we had, is we would want to interact not just with the Cape and Islands, not just with Southeastern Mass, not just with the state, not just with New England, potentially on a federal level. And so that's how we got back to region as a undefined word. And we didn't want to limit the scope of our interaction. But I think we need to swap it around instead of within the region to say outside the Nantucket region, because we are defining ourselves as the Nantucket Regional Planning Authority or Commission. but not to focus too heavily on that detail. Anyone have a comment on the name change or potential alternative?
Madam Chair, before you go there, Andrew had his hand raised.
I'm sorry, Andrew?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I can hold my comment till we get down to mission. I do have a few observations about that, so I'll
Okay.
just yield the floor till you go through the.
Right, other commissioners with comments on, we'll just go from the top on the name. Do people support that change? I see a thumbs up, a couple of thumbs up.
Support.
Okay. So moving on in the discussion, the scope of authority, we tried to write that in a comprehensive but succinct way. Those are big challenges to meet. Wendy?
Yeah, that one stood out. Just did we have something to compare it to from the past? Did we have a scope of authority before? I just say like what I read it, the regional, it's the RPA responsible for one municipality. Okay, but responsible for what for the one? Should that be a little bit more, because it's in context of compared to say the planning board compared to other, town entities. Is that relevant or am I just off base?
No, I think, again, the words have multiple meanings. So I think in this case, perhaps we meant encompasses rather than has authority or direction. So it's intended in a geographic sense, as we're assigned one municipality, the way that other RPAs might be assigned multiple municipalities.
So I guess that it's really specifically limited to geography.
Yeah, and so we might change that responsible to encompasses, for instance. Megan, I hope that you are making notes. I'm just looking for the existing scope of authority. I don't know, quickly, I'm going to find that. Actually, it might be on the website. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, I don't think that's the scope of authority. That's more than mission or what we're trying to extract into the mission.
It's up above, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Says the last sentence in the first paragraph, the NPDC is the only regional planning agency representing one town. So
right, that is the sentence that we were trying to replace. Thank you, Andrew. So here we were being a little bit more explicit, and if we kept the original word representing rather than responsible here, so it'd be the regional planning authority representing one municipality in the state of Massachusetts, consisting of both the town and county and the islands and the waters.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Andrew.
I think that authority here is actually agency, because again, we say we're one of 13. RPA, I believe, is the
great. So we can make that
for the regional planning agency, not authority. So
thank you. Anything further on the scope of authority statement? Right, comments on the vision. So to support a resilient, sustainable, and equitable Nantucket community with planning that balances economic, environmental, and social factors for current and future needs. Again, we were trying to be succinct. It's hard to boil some of these things down and not give in to the tendency to elaborate. Mike?
Just something from experience recently. I would, in the vision, I would strike the first two words to support those more mission-oriented vocabulary. And I would just say your vision is a resilient, sustainable, equitable Nantucket community.
Thank you, Mike. I remember thinking to myself that a vision is an outcome, not an action. So yes. So if we remove to support, then the vision would be the resilient, sustainable, and equitable Nantucket community, et cetera. Other comments?
In that case, would you strike with planning then for logic, like for readability?
Possibly. So the planning was something that I stuck that word in because we are a planning agency, and it seemed odd to me to not have the word planning in our vision. That's debatable, certainly. And any further discussion, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if we are going to take out the to support, it would be better just to have a resilient, sustainable, and equitable community that balances, et cetera, and take out planning. I hear what you're saying, but again, planning is an action, not necessarily a vision, in reference to Mr. Burns's previous point. I think if planning is in our scope of authority and we get it in the mission somewhere, we should be covered.
And to channel my mother, the English teacher, I think in this sentence, the with planning modifies the to support part of the sentence. So I can agree with removing it.
Yeah.
Mother will be very proud of me.
We'll put planning in there somewhere, but I think, this whole thing is meant to be read contiguously, not, we're pulling out specific sections right now, but it's supposed to support the whole idea of what we're trying to do.
Mike, do you still
Madam
have?
Chair?
Yes, John, go ahead.
I'm just trying to simplify and make this sentence even smaller. I'm not sure if this is appropriate or not, but instead of using that balances, just replacing it with balancing. A resilient, sustainable, and equitable Nantucket community balancing economic, environmental, and social factors for current and future needs. Is that too petty?
If I may, I think visions that have the least amount of words are the best, so.
It's also a more active use, so thank you, John. Megan, again, I hope you're getting this down. Mike, did you have another comment?
Madam Chair, I'll lower my hand, although I will say, I'll make an Oxford comma note that I'm talking. If you can guess where the Oxford comma should go. Make a game out of this.
I'm going to guess after factors or after community, one or the other. It's hard now that we're editing the sentence to envision where the comma goes.
We'll say sustainable just to keep them seated in the next set of.
There it is.
Sustainable.
Yeah, we should put grammar in our new name, I think. All right, so Megan, can you read back the sentence just for our benefit after the various edits?
I did not get that word for word. I intended on going back, listening to the tape and editing the document and kind of doing it that way.
I'll take a stab at it. So the vision is a resilient, sustainable, and equitable Nantucket community balancing economic, environmental, and social factors for current and future needs. All right, any further comment or suggestions? Have we left anything out? Should we remove anything else?
Nice job, Mary.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm not sure. I just want to say I'm not sure about dropping out the word by, because that tells you how you're getting there. It's the vehicle that drives that part of the system. So I don't know. It's just, I hear you. You can probably get by without it, but I kind of like it because it's telling you the mechanism or the mechanisms that we're trying to do to get there. So.
Did I accidentally leave out a word back? Because there's no by on the screen that we're. Or did you mean Nantucket community by balancing economic?
You know what? I'm looking at multiple versions here right now. I'm back to our document that we were working on the 14th. We can circle back to that, but we can drop it for the moment.
Okay, so moving on to the mission, the first statement, excuse me, the NRPC provides leadership and support for the Nantucket region by developing policies, programs, and projects that consider the diversity of our demographics, culture, and environment to benefit both visitors and residents. And so to me, that was our internal focus, and the second one was our external focus.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything more or less that we want to do with that first bullet? And then we'll move on to the second. Andrew and then Wendy.
Chair, I just wanted to point out that I think it's important to remind people of the Nantucket region because, as you know, we got left out of some earlier efforts at the state level. And so I think that the bifurcating it is important. I guess I have more, I think the second bullet needs more explanations, but I can hold those comments again until you get to the second one, if that's where we're going.
Yeah, and you know, this is by no means set in stone. You know, our thinking can evolve and we can circle back, but just trying to take these one at a time for clarity. Wendy, did you have something you wanted to comment?
I guess I'm just pondering the inclusion of culture and wondering in what regard we mean that.
I can take a stab at that. I think we were trying to stay away from words like quality of life,
Mm-hmm.
trying to recognize the unique character of Nantucket. So I think culture encompasses, you know, all of our social diversity that we have. Demographics is more the stats, and the environment is the natural environment. Seth or Barry, do you want to weigh in on that interpretation?
Now, I'm just going to say we went back and forth over this quite some time, and we wanted to get rid of ambiguous or fluffy comments like quality of life, or you know, where quality of life is going to be 10 different things for 10 different people. So I think reducing it down to a smaller term by using the word culture, it was a little bit more diverse in terms of what that could be construed as, and really didn't pinpoint it down to, you know, individuals saying, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you know, to meet my quality of life. Does that make a little sense toward why we chose something a little bit broader in scope?
Yeah, and I'll add that what we send to the legislature shouldn't constrain us from being able to do things in the future or require us to do very specific things in the future. So having broad language, I think, is a benefit. At the same time, we do want to sort of, you know, stake our territory as to what we do want to do. So this is where we ended up, and again, certainly can be edited. Andrew, did you want to offer more comments here?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I personally do like the term culture. I do think that there may be some terms like this that would need to include some definitions. And if you look at the Cape Cod Commission Act, they do have a sort of a section that does define what they mean by that. And I think there are a couple words in here. I'm glad to see this away from some of the other terms that, again, are so subjective. But I do think that, you know, this is a term that maybe could benefit from a little thought on defining what it means, because again, any of these terms can, you know, be cherry picked, and then you think that, you know, is something to be, and I'm glad to hear that you as the group are thinking that through, because it comes up a lot, certain terms, you know, to be Steve, alternate interpretations.
further comments or thoughts on this first bullet, John?
Yeah, just looking I don't mind the word culture as well. I'm just wondering about history, if there's any room for history, because we are a little unique. And what I mean by using the word history, we don't have lights on the island here in our transportation. Obviously, we're connected by water. Our speed limits, we have a highway, but we don't exceed 45 miles an hour. We have roundabouts and rotaries. So, maybe it's not a lot, but it makes us a little unique here, 30 miles out to sea, and we are a historic island. That's one of the reasons why people come here to see us and vacation there. So I don't know if there's any room for that in that. I just brought it up for discussion. That's all.
Mhm.
Thank you, John. Further thoughts? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did have a discussion about historic character as part of this. I had some comments about not including that language, just because I think it's sort of outside of the scope of what our authority should be. And that personally, although I think that Nantucket does need to really do a good job making sure that we retain those unique characteristics that Mr. Trudell is talking about. Sometimes at a regional level, especially going into the future where we're dealing with things like climate change and sea level rise, we might have to propose regional projects that actually are somewhat in opposition to the historic things that are done on Nantucket. And then it's going to be the organizations like HGC and the preservation organizations and the historical commission and select board and whoever else to find a compromise in the middle. Our job is to consider all alternatives, figure out what the optimal thoughts for the future on Nantucket are theoretically, and then other boards are going to tell us, yeah, that will never get permitted, or we need to compromise, something like that. That's where I personally see it. I don't necessarily have a problem with adding the one word history into the first point of the vision, though, that if we just said projects that consider the diversity of our demographics, culture, environment, and history could be fine.
Barry?
Yeah, I'm not keen on it at all. I think culture was the key to it at this point, because what are those things that make Nantucket its own unique thing that it is? History to me has always been, well, all right, if we're going to start defining history, what period in history are we defining? Are we defining before the Great Fire, after the Great Fire, 1920s, when the Planning Economic Development Commission came on place? History is a little bit troublesome, because when you start looking at what it is that you're trying to prove out at this point, well, pick a point in time as to what you're trying to exhibit, and you may find things that either earlier or after totally conflict with what the history is. So I'm quicker to stick with the word culture and use that to enrich what we're doing here.
I think that we intend to elaborate on all of these sort of catch-all terms as we get to the objectives. And part of my view on this is that in several areas where we might have a concern, there are also multiple organizations dealing directly with that, such as housing, such as land conservation, such as historic preservation, and that we shouldn't necessarily try and shoulder that burden and either compete with them or otherwise try and muddy the waters on the work that those groups are doing. But which is not to say at the same time that we would be silent. John?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm more inclined to agree with Seth's position and how he explained it. You know, we don't want to be held bound to making any kind of decisions based on, you know, historical factors, because with the changing climates and things that we're going to be dealing with, we want to leave ourselves open. So I just added that in for discussion, but I'm very happy with everyone's input.
So are you proposing not to add the history?
Yes, I would stand to remove that. Yes.
Thank you, John. No, I think it is an important discussion. Certainly our historic character is extremely important and influential. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, John. And I think the idea that Andrew had about having a definitions is good. Sometimes people don't read those, but if it's all the way at the end of the legislation, but if it's there, we can talk a little bit about how these things, you know, are related to culture. So I think we'll have a chance at that point.
Was there somebody else who had a comment before we go to Barry? Just want to make sure that all the voices are heard.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, I wasn't sure if you were waving at me, so. Dave, you're on mute.
I was not waving at you.
Okay, thank you. Barry?
My head.
So just a few quick things. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought right at that second. You know, one thing we really strive to do when we were looking at this document was to say we really need to focus ourselves as being a regional agency. We didn't want to step into other people's bailiwick here. We don't want to be the master of all. When it comes to local things, there are plenty of boards and commissions to do that. So we really did try to pull back as much as possible and just say we're really looking at ourselves from how do we interact with and how do we bring ourselves forward and what can we leverage on a regional basis. Maybe it doesn't need to be a lexicon in place, and maybe we can handle some of this with footnotes instead. But yeah, I think it'll be worth maybe taking a few of these words and elaborating a little bit on what kind of context we're using them in. But again, too, if we're going to do that, I don't want to be limited to, well, you said this and you know, you're way outside the scope of that, or you're hell bent to have to do it just the way we said. Somewhere in here, we're going to need to incorporate as well, too, is that things shouldn't in here be as tightly construed as possible to what we're trying to accomplish in our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Dave?
I'm just wondering if somewhere in the mission statement, there should be a reference to how we interact with the state as far as funding for transportation and like things that we just went over, you know, for a while, the transportation plan. Should that be referenced somehow, some way in our mission statement?
I think we are hinting at it in the second bullet, and I'm happy to move the discussion to the second bullet.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Jumping ahead. Yeah, just I'm throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, a comment?
I just wanted to point out that at least in the Cape Cod enabling legislation, they put the definitions right up front. So that's kind of the model that I was thinking of for that. And again, I just think that sometimes that can be helpful. Again, when people try to interpret things. I mean, I understand I don't want it to be too tight, but I get nervous if it's too loose as well. One other thing I thought that we had discussed a little bit is maybe coordination or and I think that was sort of the idea for locally, you know, that the one thing that leadership and support, yes, absolutely. But there was also some coordination and, to make or consist, where we're helping for consistency of, what everybody's doing, that, as we look over what's happening, what's being proposed in the region. So we don't have conflicts, or at least we can sort of manage those. So I don't have an actual proposal for you on that, but it's just, I thought that word was kind of important for what, a role of the commission.
Thank you, Andrew. And we definitely did take that view in our previous discussions. Part of the challenge of this is you look at the words for so long that you can't even see them anymore. So very happy to get the input from the commissioners seeing this for the first time. Joe, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree. Like with culture, I think it's kind of broad range in its wording, and I don't think we want to be too specific in anything. And then at first when I heard the word history, I was like, yeah, that should be in there. But then as we kind of the discussion and the debate went on, I feel like Nantucket is synonymous with the word history. I know it's like kind of a little loose base, but with what the HTC does and Holly Bacchus and et cetera, I just think there's a lot of that's encompassing. So I don't want to be too pointed. I think you guys have done a great job, really hitting a lot of the high notes. So I think this is a really good job to starting point. So yeah, I think that we don't want to get too pointed in this. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Let me check with Dave. Your hand is still up. Did you have another comment? Okay, and let's go to Seth then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3 quick things. The first is in relation to Andrew's comment. I would support adding and RPC provides leadership, support, and coordination for the Nantucket region. I think that would be fine. The second comment is in relation to Dave's comment about transportation planning. So I know it's not on the screen here and not everyone's seen it. So we're benefiting from work that, we looked at, but specific actions like transportation planning or area planning or any of these other specific tasks that we're in charge of are going to be called out in an objective. And we're not ready to, we haven't completed the objective section yet, or else we would have it for you today, but that's the next thing we're looking at. So that will definitely be covered. And then the third thing on the mission, getting back to how these 2 points interact with each other. I understand they're different. I understand they need to be segmented out, but I strongly believe that it's impossible for us to function effectively unless we're doing both of these things in coordination. We need to provide leadership and support for our region locally, but at the same time, we need to also collaborate with other regions. We need to promote Massachusetts interests at the state and federal levels generally. We can't do anything without doing that, or we can do something, but it's not going to be super effective. So I don't know if we need to merge all the language together, but it really is, in my opinion, 2 halves of the same thing. And I understand that people disagree, but that's how I see it.
So Seth, you're giving me some ideas about how we might approach that, but I think probably you, Barry, and I want to flesh that out in our own meeting rather than live on camera. Other comments on the second bullet in particular. And RPC serves as an advocate for Nantucket, and I believe we're changing that to outside the Nantucket region, fostering cooperative efforts among municipalities, and in addition, promoting public and private efforts throughout the region. And again, that would be, I would just strike throughout the region. So promoting public and private efforts to resolve issues, solve problems, and exploit opportunities whenever and wherever such efforts can benefit from sound regional planning. And again, just striking that language because the word region needs to be clearly understood, and it's hard to use it to refer to both our jurisdiction and outside our jurisdiction. Comments or questions? Andrew?
Thank you. I just think that the municipalities, I think that's a leftover from another region, like a region that has multiple municipalities in it, because we want to have cooperative efforts with outside municipalities, outside entities, really could be other regions. So I don't know if that should be generalized, but I think the key is I know what you're getting at, which I think is correct. I totally agree with what Seth had said about, yes, we want to be able to have these efforts, you know, beyond our borders with, could be with Barnstable, it could be with the Cape Cod Commission, it could be, again, Franklin County, you know, a project that we're doing with them. So in addition to, you know, possibly other entities that are national or otherwise. So I just, that municipality.
It may not be the correct term. You're right, Andrew.
Should be government entities or
How would you say with other government entities? That the word outside is a little odd to me. Unless we want to change that to off island.
Thank you. That's just
I think it's more appropriate language, yes.
And that kind of circles back into why we used the word throughout the region initially, because we wanted to say there's beyond Nantucket that we really need to be interacting with.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Barry, to interrupt. Megan, you deleted something that was actually rewording. So NRPC serves as an advocate for Nantucket. Serves an advocate outside the Nantucket region. So that, or I'm not sure that was the right wording, but we needed to, again, to Barry's point, to make a point of saying that we don't just operate within our island.
Yeah, the language before was within the region.
yeah, just the region.
Yeah.
We'll watch the video.
I'm sorry, let's go back to Barry, whom I interrupted before we go.
No. That's we're good here.
Okay. All right. I do see Andrew has his hand up again. So go ahead, Andrew.
I just thought, I think I heard Joe say it, that because you've got Nantucket and outside the Nantucket region, like I think it should just say outside the region, because we've already identified the Nantucket region in the first bullet above. So.
Great.
Okay. So Megan, the word for would also disappear. Right. I think that is better put. Thank you all. Other comments on the second bullet? Comments in general with what we've reached here?
Just one thing.
Mhm.
The way that word that Andrew brought up, cooperative, I'm just having a problem trying to see where to place it, but if it could just be somewhere in that mission section, just so that we know we need to circle back on it.
Yeah, was it coordinated or cooperative, Andrew?
Coordinated. I heard Seth say this. He had it there.
Yeah, if I may, if you go to the first sentence of the first bullet point, just saying the NRPC provides leadership, support, and coordination.
There you go.
Okay.
And then while I still have the floor, if I may, down in the second bullet point, maybe we can fix this offline, but the wording's a little bit odd after we get past with other government entities now. with the and comma in addition, I think we could
We
probably,
can probably eliminate and.
yeah, and promotes is probably fine.
All right, do we have a draft that we'll move forward with? Seems like we do. All right, seeing some thumbs up. Again, we'll come back to some of the objectives that will help flesh this out and decide whether or not we want to include the objectives in the legislation or we want to keep them internal. The advantage would be, of course, that they're public and available to everybody. The disadvantage would be if we ever wanted to change or add or subtract, we'd have to go back and change the legislation. And I think when we get to the objectives, you might decide that those are better kept internally, but to be determined. Christy, you had a hand up, I think.
Just a quick comment, just to thank Seth and Barry and you for all the work you guys did. This is a huge improvement from kind of the brainstorming we did last month, and I'm really excited for where it's going and what's coming together. So thank you guys for putting in the effort.
Thank you.
Agree.
Thank you, Dave.
Cheers.
Okay, so Megan, I think there are a few things that we didn't capture in the vision that we changed before you were able to get the Word document up. But I think we can coordinate that offline, not take more time tonight. So that is the discussion of our mission. Next item on the agenda is discussion of 2023 annual town meeting preparation. So I had suggested to Andrew that we might do a handout for town meeting. And the elements of that handout would be a very, very brief description of the responsibilities of NP and EDC, the responsibilities of the planning board, and the responsibilities of the planning director and planning department for just public education, as that is sometimes difficult to keep in mind. A brief history of our work for the last 12 months. Not quite an annual report, but just again to familiarize people with the NP and EDC and what it does do and accomplish. Potentially, with your approval, the statement that we just looked at, the vision and mission, so that again, people would have an idea of what we have done to work on the directive that was given at the last town meeting. As Andrew said, I think that's everything. Was there anything? Oh, and also our positions on the articles that we have previously discussed. That was the other. So sort of the first part on one page and the second part on the other side, something like that. Open again to the ideas from commissioners about whether to do that, about what to include on it. Would love to hear your thoughts. Andrew, and if there's anything I skipped, please go ahead and add that.
And Megan, did you update our list articles?
And Andrew, I was planning on running through that with the town meeting update that you wanted me to give quickly.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to share this first, Leslie, or the couple of slides?
Let's start with that one.
Okay.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Leslie. Do you want to? I think that Leslie, you attended the Meet the Articles, right? And
I did.
There were some discussions that maybe you could update us on.
Sure. Okay, so we'll start with this slide. The Planning Commission made recommendations to the Finance Committee on the articles listed: 11, 14, 17, 36, 72, 76, 81, 82, some real estate articles, 83, and 102. And the Finance Committee motions were all consistent with your recommendations. In Article 11, they appropriated $13 million for these transportation goals. In Article 14, they voted to appropriate $4.6 million. And then Article 76, they modified the article significantly which wasn't completely consistent with your recommendation to not support the article, but they did make substantive changes that will make it easier for Plus to administer. So that was a good thing. So does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay. So staff has attended several meetings leading up to town meeting. I was at the Civic League last Wednesday and discussed an article, which I'll get to in a minute. We have been at the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers. We did a continuing education course for them. Megan Trudell and I handled that. We went over some general zoning and subdivision control law things, but we also went through all of the articles and took a lot of questions, both regarding the articles and just generally. And then this Wednesday, the Builders Association is going to be discussing warrant articles. I'm not invited to be a presenter there, but I am planning to go. I know that they're discussing several zoning articles that I think, it's important for us to know what their view is. So I'll be there for that, just to listen. And if they have questions for me, of course, I'll take those. Megan, can we get the housing choice slide up? So one thing that's new this year, well, it's not new this year, but the way we formatted it is new. In 2020, wait for her to pull that up. So in 2020, the legislature adopted Chapter 358 of the Acts of 2020, which included a lot of different things, but relative to zoning, town meeting, and special permits, there was a section that modified the Zoning Act, and it modified Chapter 40A, Section 5. And those modifications changed the special permit voting threshold for the planning board from a supermajority to a simple majority in certain circumstances. And relative to town meeting, it changed the voting threshold from a 2/3 majority vote to a simple majority vote if certain criteria are met. So some of those criteria include adding additional housing units, reducing parking requirements, and adding multifamily units. And there are other things that are included, but those are the three big ones that mostly apply to Nantucket. So any article that the planning board determined qualified for the simple majority threshold is listed in the warrant. The reason for that determination is listed after the planning board's motion. And there's a pretty substantial explanation for all the articles. So I'm going to talk about Article 39. We have two articles that are getting a lot of attention. Article 39 is a planning board sponsored article addressing residential swimming pools and hot tubs. That was something that I spoke about briefly at the Civic League last week. There was an alternate opinion provided by Ann Deweese, and that was fairly quick, but it's getting quite a bit of attention, and it's an article that was sponsored by the planning board. It addresses a directive provided to us by the land court. The town is currently in litigation over our definitions of swimming pool and hot tub and how they should be interpreted. And we were given a directive by the land court, and this article would address the directive that was provided, and it would remove what may be some ambiguity in our existing definitions. So we would be creating three criteria that are clearly identified just by the surface area. So we would have a new definition for hot tub or spa or hot tub. That's 75 square feet of surface area or less, with certain criteria being met. A small swimming pool that's less than 150 square feet of surface area, again with certain criteria. And then a large swimming pool that's over 150 square feet in surface area with certain criteria. And the article doesn't change our current allowances as far as what's allowed in which districts. It just redefines these residential water features, if you will. So this is an important article, again, to remove ambiguity and to address the directive provided by the land court. And then the other article, Article 60, that's the short-term rental article, that's a citizen petition. That's gotten a lot of publicity, I guess, lots of letters to the editor, lots of discussion on social media. The planning board did not give that a positive recommendation. They made a motion not to adopt. And they did that out of deference to the select board and their request that articles related to short-term rentals not move forward at this town meeting. The motion not to adopt, again, was made by the planning board. It was supported by the finance committee, and it was supported by the select board. And this one is on the agenda Wednesday night. The builders are going to discuss it, so I'm anxious to see sort of what they think about it and see how this works out at town meeting. But that's the update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Leslie. Are you suggesting that we add to our list of articles that we have expressed an opinion on for the, like this 39, 60, 61 that you just reviewed? And
I don't think that's really necessary. I just wanted you to know that those are getting a lot of attention, and those are articles that we've spent quite a bit of time on, either through drafting them and holding public hearings or just addressing concerns and interacting with town council and the town manager and other people.
Okay. Comments or questions for Leslie? Not seeing any. Was there more that you wanted to review, or is that?
Nope, that was it.
All right, so Megan, do you want to put up the list of articles again? So the question would be, do we want to provide town meeting with this information, essentially as presented here, or as we might want to modify it in a handout form, so that, like other organizations, we would have our opinions available to the public.
Fair.
Yes, Andrew?
I just would like to speak to a couple articles and the importance of communicating with the public. I do think Article 83, which we've reviewed and voted unanimously on, and that the Finance Committee has also voted unanimously not to support. I do think we need to communicate, certainly, the reasoning behind the commission's vote on that, and I would definitely assume that that would be part of our, what we prepare. I also think that 102 and the companion 103 about 31 Easy Street is a joint article that really involves long-range planning for the acquisition of the property at the corner of Easy Street and the terminal. The land bank, the steamship authority, and the town are all involved in this. It does have a positive motion from both the Finance Committee and the Select Board, have voted to support the Finance Committee's recommendation. I think it definitely falls within our area of consideration for the future. It hits a number of areas of concern, including, future transportation, future access, how we deal with possible sea level rise and other impacts to the downtown. So I think I would hope that we have strong statement for both of those articles.
Thank you, Andrew. Just as a side note, there is scheduled to be a presentation on those two articles at the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. from the Land Bank. We had requested that information and they are able to provide it. So just for anyone's interest on that. So again, wanting to know from commissioners, the idea of a handout of giving our positions on the articles, approximately as stated here. Andrew's addition of 103 and a more detailed statement for the 31 Easy Street companion articles. This is something that would be drafted by the planning department and handed out at town meeting. So we definitely want to make sure that you have an opportunity to make any suggestions and hopefully to endorse this. We will not see the final version before town meeting.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted also to bring your attention to Article 86, the fertilizer article. It's something that we didn't really discuss. And a simple read of that doesn't make it clear that the commission would have a role in that article. If you remember last year, the recommendation on this home rule petition was to extend a timeline for additional work on fertilizer through the Regional Planning Commission. That article, that recommendation from Finance Committee was not adopted, and a basically full ban of fertilizer was pursued. So it's a development I just wanted you all to be aware of. We never really discussed a position on it, even though we will see a role on it. And we did support it. I believe we supported it in its original iteration that appeared last year. So just to make you aware that it's back again in a different form than, well, in the original form as recommended, but not in the form as approved by town meeting last year.
So are you providing a staff recommendation then as to whether we would want to support a motion to adopt or a motion not to adopt?
Guess I'm asking you all if you want to weigh in on this at all. I think the statement on this article is, from town meeting was the complete ban, even though I'm not sure that is going to be approvable. And I think that was the advice that was given. If you remember, this was a citizen article when it was first proposed. And the advice from town council was this more moderate recommendation to have the planning commission act on this.
So the finance committee has a motion which is to move forward something a little bit different than what is in the article. Am I reading that right, Andrew?
Yes.
Do we need to put that on the screen for people? Megan, I don't know if you still want to. While we're getting that, any initial thoughts on Article 86 about fertilizer? So it's the title is Home Rule Petition, an Act Regulating the Application of Nutrient Management and Fertilizer in the Town of Nantucket. Yeah, it's way down there at the end. Excuse me. There it is. So let's go to the Finance Committee recommendation. So section 1 is the essential information.
Right. So what's not completely clear here, Madam Chair, is that where it references adopted in the town of Nantucket under Chapter 561 of the Acts of 1973, that is our enabling legislation. Will be extended for a period of 2 years. So this article by the select board was submitted, as they've kind of changed the vote of town meeting here, or it's a substitute, I guess. Approved. So this language follows the FinCom recommendation of last year, and is I guess I want to bring it to your attention because if it does pass, there'll be a requirement, within that 2 years to address the issue of fertilizer, which will probably mean consultants or other, we do not have personnel that deal with fertilizer type issues. So it will require us to do, something with that. I mean, I would think we would work with our Board of Health or Natural Resources Department on this, but we clear that we're in a sort of leadership role here. If this eventually passes, and this is a home rule petition, so it will take some time.
So our current situation is that last year's town meeting voted to send a home rule petition to the legislature, essentially banning fertilizer. And that petition has not been acted on yet by the legislature. And so at this year's town meeting, the select board is putting forth an alternate way of dealing with fertilizer regulation. Have I summarized that correctly, Andrew?
Yes, very good. Thank you. So it's there just for your knowledge. It's not, unless anyone wants, feel strongly about it one way or the other.
So it seems like this is a wait and see, but be aware that you're waiting for it. Not something we're necessarily making a statement upon, unless the commission feels otherwise. Any thoughts or comments? Barry?
Yeah, no, I think I would really like to see the Board of Health take the lead role in this. This is definitely within their bailiwick to be able to do it. Not to say that we're not there to support or help with things, but it's either going to be natural resources or it's going to be the Board of Health. And I've always, at least according to everything I've learned over the years, Board of Health really should be taking the lead role in trying to deal with this. The second thing is I think we've definitely got a few objectives here that we need to really focus and hone on at town meetings. So I don't want to necessarily take this on as another project and dilute what our core mission is here for town meeting to get accomplished. Thanks.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the process honestly has gotten a little bit confusing. Having the active home rule petition waiting at the State House to potentially be acted on. I know it could take 5 to 8 years in some cases, but the fertilizer BMP, the fertilizer regulations on Nantucket are already active, and there are some huge problems with enforcement, but I don't know what this would do. It seems like it would get back to us to say, okay, now we need to figure out something else within the extremely limited scope of state law that already exists, that we can't do anything that essentially would supersede what UMass Extension is already telling us. UMass Extension is basically telling us that our fertilizer BMP as it exists today is fine. So this would come back to us and we would probably get to nowhere. I would support not having this article not pass. I've spoken out publicly in favor of the fertilizer ban in the past, but independent of my views on that or not, I think this article just makes it way more confusing. If the fertilizer ban ends up passing at the state, fine. If it never gets acted on, fine. But there's no like crisis happening. The fertilizer regulations already exist and already have been enacted on Nantucket.
Mhm.
I think we should just ask for this article to be withdrawn, to be honest.
Other thoughts, Barry?
I just threw you to Andrew. Andrew, who was, so it's by the select board, but I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch, was it the select board proper? Or were they doing it for another board, commission, or individual?
Well, I believe,
Or-
I believe it was done by the select board. I don't know if this is in coordination with the Board of Health or not.
Mhm.
Again, I will tell you that I wasn't focused on this. I wasn't really included in
Mhm.
this coming back in this particular format. I mean, again, without it mentioning the NP and EDC, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's chapter 561 there. That's us. So anyway, it's something that, once the warrant was issued, I wanted just to make sure that y'all knew about it. So,
Mhm.
I mean, if we want to communicate, our feelings on it, it's past the normal procedure, but there's no reason why we couldn't, keep up in here. I could, I can check with the Board of Health and see if, if there's other levels of support for this that I'm not aware of.
Did anyone attend the Finance Committee meeting where they discussed this motion? Do we have any background on why they made this motion? I'm not seeing anybody saying yes. Seth?
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we could probably find the Finance Committee hearing or ask for clarification at the staff level. But I'm pretty strongly in support of, well, first getting some additional information about why that was put forward, and then asking them to maybe reconsider. I don't really appreciate other boards entering articles that place requirements on our behalf without asking us if we're willing to even do that. That's a little bit disconcerting, to be honest. I understand technically why it was done, because the NP and EDC had that authority based on state law. But I think it's already so confusing with what's happening with fertilizer regulation on island that we should respectfully request that this be discontinued for 2023 town meeting, and maybe we can get our heads together how to better proceed for a special town meeting or 2024. This is asking us to do a lot without asking us if we're willing to do a lot.
Mhm.
Andrew, I understand what you said about the deadline that's referenced is part of our enabling act. Does this Finance Committee motion put the burden on the NP and EDC to develop these regulations, or is it not clear?
Well, if it passes, it would, yes, it would. The NP and EDC, as Seth mentioned, I mean, it's under this technical allowance, or, the Vineyard, Martha's Vineyard, the Cape, and Nantucket had some ability to adopt alternative fertilizer type regulations. And at the time, the Board of Health was the author of those. They had recently passed their their rules and regulations. So the health director at the time didn't feel the need to make any changes. So those are the rules that we live by right now. So
It's 7 o'clock.
anyway, and again, I think this is the motion that was proposed at last year's town meeting. But it was not the motion that passed at last year's town meeting. This did not pass in this form. It was a ban. Oh, I certainly think that we could follow, if there's agreement with what Seth has proposed, there's certainly, we could certainly make that request. They don't have to, otherwise it would have to be called, and an alternative motion would have to be made.
Okay, let's go to Joe for a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would have thought this would have come from the Board of Health or the Concom or something along those lines. Seems a little odd it came from the Select Board, but yeah, I agree with Seth. I just think this is going to get batted around and go nowhere. And I move to not to adopt. I just think it's really going to be languished, and as Seth pointed out, they basically said that we, kind of hinting that we agreed to this or approved it, but we've had no discussion of it. And hearing it now and seeing it now in this conversation, I really don't think that we should, adopt it in any way, shape, or form.
So it sounds like there are two different suggestions of how we could proceed, and always the third option of doing nothing. But so one suggestion is to offer an alternative motion. Because the Finance Committee motion is to move forward. And the other path suggested was to ask that the article be withdrawn. I'm not sure what the procedural steps are for either one of those. Andrew, if you want to provide more information on that.
It's once the warrant has been adopted and it's too late to withdraw. I mean, so there would be possibilities like to indefinitely postpone, or to move not to adopt, or to for this. So there's some other alternative motions that are different from this, essentially a positive motion here.
And would that motion be put forward by an individual at town meeting, or would it be put forward from some other source?
Well, depending on what the commission wishes, we could approach the Finance Committee and ask them to reconsider. You have meetings scheduled right up to the date of town meeting. Other alternative is to prepare, a motion, alternative motion to call the article and introduce that at town meeting.
Barry?
Yeah, I mean, the option here may be to refer to committee, and the committee is going to be the Board of Health and Concom. Because no one's consulted with us, which as Seth said, but that's welcome to Nantucket. So until something can come out of this, that might be the best way to dispose of it, is just turf it on back to where it really should sit, is with those two, one or both of those boards. And that's my thought.
Thank you, Barry. Seth, did you also have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have an issue with that approach. Speaking as your Conservation Commission rep, I mean, we are obviously engaged in fertilizer regulation. The fertilizer BMP is part of actually the Nantucket Wetlands regulations. It's included in full text in that. So we're already doing that. And the Natural Resources Department is assisting us with that. And so is the Board of Health. I'm not sure if everyone knows, Andrew sort of listed this out, but the reason why it's our enabling legislation is being called out is because we were the ones granted authority in the state. NP and EDC, I mean, was granted authority in the state to handle fertilizer. Concom, Board of Health, Select Board, none of those boards can do anything to actually change the fertilizer regulations right now. And it's even limited, or it's even questionable as to whether NP and EDC can, because the window to submit the changes has expired. So we can refer this to a committee, but the committee is going to tell you you have to keep your regulation as it exists, or you have to submit a home rule petition to the state. And a home rule petition was already submitted. So I would prefer just to ask them not to adopt or to postpone for future discussion, but the committee isn't going to be able to tell you anything that we don't already know.
An issue that I have here is the extension of the deadline for 2 years from the effective date of this act. 2 years is a really short time in government world. And so, if the burden is on NP and EDC to manage this process, regardless of what other agencies and consultants might be inputting their information, it seems like a really onerous requirement for something that, as Andrew said, this is not our area of expertise. If we have to bid something out, if we have to hold multiple rounds of public hearings, I mean, that all is going to take time, and 2 years is not a lot of time.
Madam Chair, so it seems to me that there's not really a lot of support, or if any, I haven't heard any so far, for this particular approach. So that probably we would want to have some sort of discussion about an alternative motion to not adopt. Is that pretty much the same?
I have a quick comment.
Wendy, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. Just that, I'd hate to, I hear all the problems with the way this is panned out, and, that postponing seems right, but I guess I must push back on a 2-year being a really short time when it's clear that the harbor is in crisis, the scallop industry is in duress, et cetera, all the things that we've heard outside it. And I certainly wouldn't want the public to think that we don't care and we're dragging our feet, we're slowing some process down. The point is hopefully that it's accelerated, it's already ahead of this, and it doesn't need another push. So I guess I just wanted to go on the record to be kind of like Seth, personally very supportive of this. So, but perhaps it's just the structure that's the issue.
Thank you, Wendy. Go to Dave. Dave, you're on mute.
If we change our motion, or what I don't understand is, if it stays the way, do we have the ability to amend our best business practices now? I guess that's to Seth through you. Is this kind of an all or one shot at amending those practices, or are we allowed to continue to amend what we're doing now?
Seth, are you able to respond?
Yes. The short answer is no. The fertilizer regulations as exist today and the BMPs associated with that regulation are very difficult to change. They're basically were sent out and accepted by the state with technical review from UMass Amherst. The only way that they can be changed now is through a home rule petition that would supersede the legislation that cut off the Cape Vineyard and Nantucket's authority to have their own independent regulations. Most municipalities or most regions never even got the chance to have their own fertilizer regulations. They just have to abide by what UMass Amherst Extension says. The state gave us special permission because of our unique habitats. We exercised that permission, and now we're kind of stuck with the decisions that were exercised apart from a home rule petition.
And those regulations were adopted quite some time ago, and in the meantime, our population has grown. The impact on the harbors has grown. Like Wendy, I personally support the restriction of the use of fertilizer in order to maintain and improve water quality. But I think Seth's point was that we already have regulations that aren't being enforced that we could, use to achieve those goals. Am I saying that correctly, Seth?
Yes, it is. And there is a citizens petition or citizen article for a ban that did pass at last year's town meeting. I'm sure everyone has their own thoughts on that, but that warrant article, the ban, was seeking to supersede the regulations by doing a home rule petition. So even if we brought this back to committee and the NP and EDC looked at it, I still think our authority has expired and we would have to bring another home rule petition to the state, which they might not act on anyway. And sometimes, these things take 5+ years to be acted on. So I think we should just try to support the ban that's already at the state house, or if people don't want to support that ban, then just do nothing and deal with the regulations that exist today.
Dave, do you still have a comment to make before we go to Andrew?
No, not at the moment. Thank you, Seth.
Andrew?
I think that what Seth said is correct here. I think that, and I'm seeing other towns on the Cape have sent similar requests to the state to initiate bans and other things. I think that sort of reopening this this window that closed, and this is many years ago. This is almost, I think, 10 years ago. I think 2014 is when it closed. I think if they're, and I don't see that they have resubmitted the amended version that went to town meeting that was voted, because you have to re-up those votes, to keep the legislation alive. So it seems to me that there's going to be a need for a separate home rule petition that is dealing with the issue more directly than what is here. So I'm in agreement with what's been talked about so far. I think it's important to certainly look at the issue, but I don't think that this accomplishes really what it's.
Thank you, Andrew. Seth, do you have a motion that you want to propose?
Yes, respectfully, I would request, or I'd move that we request the Plus staff to meet with the Finance Committee and ask them to change their motion not to adopt for the reasons documented in this meeting.
Do we have a second for that motion? All right, if there is no second, the motion will not go forward to a vote. Does anyone else have a motion that they would like to put forward? All right, so if there is silence on all fronts, then we are essentially opting to do nothing and let town meeting decide how to deal with this article without our opinion or input, unless somebody individually wants to speak on town meeting floor. Seth?
Go to Barry first.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, let's try another motion. Move that the Plus staff meet with the Finance Committee to discuss alternate pathways on Article 86.
And are you specifying before town meeting or after town?
Prior to town meeting 2023.
All right, is there a second for that motion? All right, if there is none, that motion also fails to move forward. Barry?
Thank you. I hate to bring this up. Andrew, to you, Andrew, there. Is it worth just having a very quick series of conversations with both the select board and the FinCom to find out what the hell is going on, and then for us to very quickly reconvene with a final thought in the process? I hate to bring us back together, but I hate this thing hanging over our head with no answers or direction provided by anyone else from the, from these various parties who decided it was a good thing just to submit it.
Well, we have 2 weeks, before the town meeting, so.
I mean, I don't want to put a lot of work on I really don't want to put a lot of work on anyone's plate, but I want to keep it short, sweet, and have a reasonable explanation as to why we did something. I mean, that's Seth. I mean, I'm on board with you. I really am. I'm just would like that. It would have been nice if people had clued us in. And here we are having to scramble for information, which displeases the bejesus out of me at this point. But that's the only other way I can see trying to tackle this thing. With some modicum of being able to say we've got the reasons why, and this is what we're gonna do. I don't know how you all feel.
Comments from commissioners on the potential for convening again before town meeting to get more clarity on this article after the Plus staff would speak to the select board and or finance committee. John?
Yeah, I think timing is the issue. It would have been nice to discuss this last month or a couple of months ago, but looking forward with 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks remaining before town meeting, trying to get select board, finance committee, and then get feedback from them, have another meeting with a recommendation, have it published. At some point, I know what Seth's trying to do, and I think it's just too much to do in a short period of time and get everyone on board. That being said, if we just look at our mission, we have from economic and environmental things that we're concerned with. This is going to be in our wheelhouse as a governing body to kind of look at this in the future and what's going to happen. But in the short term, this is something that I think Board of Health is going to have a good say, a lot to say about. Concom, as Seth would say, this is more in their wheelhouse, than even though we are as a board have the executive type or the meat of this thrown at us. I leave it to the professionals to really comment on it, and I'm wondering if we make a comment of some sort, not necessarily a recommendation not to adopt, put other boards on the spot to try and give us feedback before then, but just a comment. I think Andrew stated something very, very early in this discussion. Just to add something that we're not just leaving it alone. We're not just avoiding it. We're saying this is something that we'd like to review at another time with more information from other boards and other professional committees and agencies. So I'm not sure what Andrew said in the beginning, but I thought it was just a comment that that expressed that we are aware of it, we're involved, but we don't want to make an opinion because we're thrown into it at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John. Andrew? And then we'll go to Barry.
I just want to be clear here is that if this article isn't called it will be thrown in the group with all articles and it will be passed, and then it will be on its way to the legislature. So I'm sensing a disconnect from the conversation we had to not seconding the motion, at least that it doesn't appear that you're in favor of this right now. There's certainly alternatives like tabling it till the special town meeting, or indefinitely tabling it until there's, more information coming. But I think to do nothing, and just so you're clear, that if it's not called, it will go into the pot with all the articles and get voted. So
Mhm.
Thank you, Andrew. Go to Barry.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get us to at this point, is some form of something. I mean, if you don't want to meet, we could meet on town meeting floor beforehand and determine something. Otherwise, maybe the best course of action here is to just, our recommendation should be to table it to special town meeting. And that way we'll be able to get some more time to be able to pull that together. I don't see what harm it's going to do to defer it for that shorter period of time.
Barry, do you want to make a motion out of that statement?
Let me go to Seth, and one of the two of us will do something here.
Okay, Seth?
I'll allow you to make a motion, but I just want to make one comment that is relevant in light of Andrew's discussion. Because I have been following this a bit, and I know that part of the reason why this was proposed in the first place is because the town government and town council believes that the language in this text is much more likely to actually be acted upon by the legislature than in the previous year's town meeting for the ban. So if this passes at town meeting, like Andrew's talking about, it will probably be enacted, and then we'll probably be here having to do something very shortly with no planning, no preparation. So John, I fully agree. It should be within our wheelhouse to do this work. And I hear you about the logistics being difficult, but you think these logistics are hard? We're going to have to be scrambling to try to do something that with absolutely no preparation. I'm not going to shy away from doing it. I just think we need time to meet with the appropriate people and table it for further discussion. And I think we should do that.
All right, let's go to Joe.
Could we make a recommendation that this not to be adopted, but maybe be put on for the next special town meeting?
I think Barry wants to make,
is that?
yeah, I think Barry wants to make that motion.
Yep, we'll go to Barry.
You can do it, Joe, if you want. I take no pride in ownership.
Lead on, kid. You said it. Go ahead.
Don't worry, we'll need
All right, let's.
there's room for both.
All right, so
You're
let's
the bad
just
guy.
I got broad shoulders.
I know.
Motion. Motion. I'm going to make a motion that we table this to special town meeting.
So if I can paraphrase Barry.
Yes,
you're
please.
making a motion that NP and EDC offer an alternative motion at town meeting to table this until the fall special town meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Joe. Any further discussion on that? All right, we'll go to a roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Angie Hudson,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
John Trudell,
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. All right, so that deals with Article 86. We are now still looking at the rest of the articles for which we had previously provided opinions. Megan, if you want to throw that list back up on the screen. And that is in the larger context of providing a printed handout at town meeting, which would contain our notes as shown on the screen, and also the information that I suggested at the beginning. So further discussion on that entirety. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support doing a printed handout, especially if staff capacity staff has capacity to do that, and I would make a motion to publish said handout with all of the items considered in this meeting so far.
Thank you, Seth. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second for discussion.
Thank you, Barry. Go ahead.
Thank you. So one page will be this. And the other page, the other flip side of the page is.
To reiterate, a very brief description of the Planning and Economic Development Commission responsibilities, the Planning Board responsibilities, and the Planning Director and Department responsibilities. That's one item. The second item is the vision and mission statement that we have adopted a draft of here tonight, and they would still be labeled draft.
Mhm.
And the third item is a brief synopsis of our activities and accomplishments for the last 12 months, essentially since last town meeting.
Good. That sounds perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion on the motion? And again, this handout would be developed by the Plus Department staff and distributed at town meeting without further review at this commission. All right, a roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Hi.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
John Trudell,
Aye.
Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, local area plan guidelines. We spoke briefly about this at the last meeting. The idea is to develop a set of guidelines for local area plans to assist them in being efficient in their work, and also to standardize the process. And so the Plus Department has developed the beginnings of some guidelines. My intention is to offer some of my insights from having worked with the town area plan. Certainly, Joe Topham is currently working with the Nantucket area plan. You're also welcome to provide any insights. I'm thinking just some helpful tips from our perspective of actually doing the work, as well as the setting the expectations for what the area plan work groups are being asked to accomplish and what resources they have available. Just trying to make this easier for everybody in general and make it consistent so that all the area plans have the same goals and opportunities. Andrew, do you want to take us through these items?
This is a little bit of stream of consciousness here, because these are things that we've certainly talked about in the past, but the task was to try to get these put on paper. So again, there's no pride in authorship here, and there may want to be some changes. So anyway, the first item is, again, we've talked about this before, that having two active area plan work groups at the same time, more than that, is strongly discouraged. That comes from two places, not only the commissioner's availability, usually there's a primary and sometimes a secondary commissioner assigned to that work, but it also requires some level of staff support for hosting meetings and, again, the coordination and other things that go along with that. We have not had our senior planner position funded for some time. We look forward to that being hopefully approved for the next fiscal year. That will be a wonderful thing to get more professional staff, to assist with this, but more than two creates a strain. The first step has always been to establish membership and adopt the boundaries. And that is very important here to this. Remember, this is a local area plan. It's what we agree to right up front is the area that the group will be planning within. Mm-hmm. So this is not about what different areas think about larger scale issues in the town of Nantucket. And in each bordering town functions, whether it be the sewer plant, the airport, or whatever, that are kind of off limits. I mean, there's obviously needs to be sometimes a recognition of the impacts of these uses to the neighborhood, but there is no authority to start jumping the boundaries into other areas without a discussion of the commission. And it's not unusual for that to happen, where the area might come back and say, hey, that original boundary, we'd like to amend it. We'd like to include different areas, or we'd like to substitute areas out. But that earlier vote has been something that we have stood pretty strong with since we incorporated the process. The other thing is about, the adoption of the members. That step to get the work group going. As you know, we follow the the basic 9 elements from what's included in the town master plan that is overseen by the planning board for consistency to try to hit all the areas. And again, what that does is identify the specific action items to come. The third bullet talks about the activities conducted within open meeting law requirements. And this has become more important as the open meeting law has really become more defined about groups making recommendations. When we started a lot of this back in 2005 and 6, it was not as strict as it is right now, but for transparency and other reasons, when members, the public, other people are interested to know why you made a certain recommendation or where did that come from, there should be a record that we all can access to tell us where it came from. The next bullet point talks about the collaboration between the work group and the NP and EDC. And again, this is a collaborative process. It's not just a neighborhood group that goes off and does something and brings back a final plan ready for approval. There needs to be conversations back and forth. There needs to be discussions about, what's included and not. There has to be openness to maybe remove and add things depending on how those conversations go. The draft plan is sort of formulated, and you all, the process that you went through to discuss the mission statement is kind of the same type of process here, is that people get a chance to look at that, propose ideas, talk back and forth about, what is included, what might be priorities, et cetera, et cetera. Next comes public hearings, which are the more formalized process. And that's followed by, potential comments that come out of that public process. And then the NP and EDC, makes a vote for final adoption. And I think that should not be taken lightly in any way, that, the commission voting on a final area plan does put responsibility for that final vote and what's contained in that under the jurisdiction of our commission. So we need to be careful about what's included in that, and that we're not including things that, again, are not part of this. There's other processes where, neighborhoods can certainly get together and have joint opinions about anything. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But an area plan is again defined by or has been, there's nothing to say it can't change into something else, but it traditionally has been defined around those 9 elements and generally following this overall guideline. So, to answer any questions.
Comments or questions from commissioners? And I think we've lost Christy Ferrantella and maybe somebody else as well. I'm sorry.
Below our quorum or no?
No, we still have 7.
Good.
Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Nantucket is getting their plan together and they're going to be putting out a survey. But one thing that seemed to be their major problem was reaching the 600 homeowners within their area. They only got, I think, 23% of the people to participate, where in Monomoy we saw it was like 55% of participation in the evaluation of their neighborhood. And I stressed to them that I think it's really important to see if you can't get more people, whether it's postcards or some way to reach more people, whether it's sitting at Millie's or at Vatican Marine, or any way to get more input, more information, so that people could get this information. It just seemed like they weren't getting everyone, and they are, with their best efforts, trying to reach everyone, but I felt that they were falling a little short. So they're trying to come up with different ways to reach more people in Nantucket, because I think that the more input we can get, the more weight would be taken on the area guidelines. So I really don't know any way better other than social media and postcards and snail mail and etc. Any way to be able to get more surveys distributed. So if anyone has any input and really how we can do that and make that better, I think that's the one thing that I'm noticing, that Matic is coming up a little short, not due to lack of effort, but just trying to find some way to move forward, because as we all know, the more information we can get, more people that weigh in, then we've got a great census of what is going on in that area, whether they want sewer, don't want sewer, or secondary dwellings, whatever it is, pools. So I really think that's really important to get as many people involved and available, so that this information can be used wisely, and then next 10 years it keeps evolving, it keeps growing. So that was my one comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And yes, that's what I'm talking about some of the helpful tips that we can offer from our experience. I think, I completely agree with the more people who are able to participate in the process, the greater the weight of the results. But there comes a point where you simply can't make people do it. So
yeah, and I also feel like some people off island don't think that they have a weight, that they have any voice or what happens in their neighborhood. And I said to the people on the call, a Zoom call, that they do have a voice, and it is important. They control what happens in their neighborhood. I think that Monomoy did a very impressive job of reaching everyone. But I do know every year they have a meeting and they all get together, and I don't know, Nantucket has really tried some of those ways to bring people together and get as many people involved. Some people think like, oh, I'm an off islander, I got no voice, and I'm not anyone. I'm not a local. I don't live here year round, and I think that that's a false statement. I think that I don't care where you live. You're in Nantucket, you're in Nantucket, and then that's an important part of the whole piece of the puzzle. You're paying your taxes, you're doing everything correctly, then you should get a vote and be heard. So that's kind of where I was kind of pushing for them to see if they couldn't expand the numbers, and they're trying to figure out different ways. And I have had a conversation again with Diane, and she's been great. And so, just trying to keep that needle moving up would be great.
Thank you, Joe. Barry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just two things. I want to make sure that when they're doing their surveys, though, that they're limited to household surveys, not per person survey.
So that was one of, excuse me for interrupting. That was one of the issues
please.
with the town area plan, and one of the discussions that I think is appropriate in this setting for guidelines is to know, what parameters you need to put on a survey depend on what the goals of the survey are. So the conversation I had with Andrew was, well, if we're talking about property rights, you need to talk to property owners. But if we're talking about, quote unquote, quality of life issues, well, then renters should have a voice, and visitors, seasonal visitors could have a voice. And so being very clear about who you're asking and what you're asking them for are important things in the design of a survey, would be the guideline we would offer.
Agree.
But to that point, you're either talking about designing and distributing two different types of surveys. If you start talking about individual responses to quality of life, that's one thing. But I think the hazard of trying to bring one master survey together that endeavors to get those responses, as different as they may be, there's a problem. And I've always felt that having sat on this in the planning board for quite some period of time, I've watched surveys evolve that are like they're the best word I could use is stacked. In terms of opinion. So that's why I'm a big fan of, keep it to the household. And if there's, or if you want to design separate surveys so we understand the quality of the information that's coming back in, that's fine. But that does need to be laid out. The only other thing I want to bring up is that in this document, the 9 elements that we require the neighborhoods to use should be just briefly stated in here as well. You don't necessarily have to elaborate on, but just say that that's the roadmap for getting there, for doing this.
Thank you,
Thank
Barry.
you.
We'll go to Andrew, and I also have some comments on what we see on the screen, but Andrew, go ahead.
I just wanted to, again, Barry, we hear you, because I know that when we did one of the surveys, we had them numbered, so we were actually definitely monitoring to make sure that it was one per household, and found that some liberties were taken with that. So, and I, this is part of my conversation with Mary too, and I think it's important when the information is presented to the commission that if it's not corrected for a household, it just needs to be clear in how it's stated, because there are instances where you want kind of an overall, I guess, impression or opinions from everybody, and then there are others that again may be driven by, who's making the final decision on the property. So, where, and we've seen this certainly at the planning board, where we have comments and people aren't clearly identifying that it's like 4 people from the same household, but it's really one property, with like-minded individuals. So I think it's just, it's something that I think definitely needs some discussion in what we do for final guidelines here. But I think there can be opportunities for both, as long as it's properly identified and presented, so we don't get a wrong impression. So anyway.
Yeah. Joe, you probably want to continue that topic, so go ahead and then I'll come after you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I recommended to the group was, well, actually just to Diane, was to have Rob Ranney, the tax assessor, get the information, print out labels, attach them onto a postcard or a letter and mail it out. So it is one per household that is answering this. And, I know you're trying to be, not knowing who is filling out the survey, but is there a way to privately put in the address so you quickly know, okay, well, we've got 5 from the same address, and we just need to pick the one. But I do think that there is a tipping of the balance trying to get like-minded people to vote on this everywhere, and I think that's a very good point that Andrew's brought up, and we need to be very careful about that. So that's why I was wondering, is it coming directly from Rob, who that's who's paying the taxes, and some may go to attorneys and they have to forward it, but I still think it's important to get that information to as many people as possible so they can weigh in. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple more just background points on that. The Nantucket Town Association, which is a civic association, it is not affiliated with NP and EDC, did send out postcards that were coded so that they could track to make sure that only one response per postcard sent to a property owner was counted in the survey. And then we, as the town area plan work group, got our addresses from Nathan through the GIS system. He was able to give us the addresses of each property that was within our area. Rather than Rob Ranney, I don't know that he would be able to easily distinguish based on a line on a map who's in and who's out and provide that list. But what we found was that with about 1,800 postcards going out, 10% of them came back undeliverable. And you wouldn't think that would happen with official addresses for property owners from the town. So I suspect that perhaps the Postal Service is not doing a perfect job in delivering them, which is just something to be aware of. And again, sort of that helpful tip that we would provide as to, ways that you can get your survey out. Joe, go ahead with a response on that.
Yeah, that's why I went to Rob or mentioned Rob, is because, as a property turns hands, the taxes and et cetera, it's going to go right from his office. So if it gets kicked back, someone's not going to be paying the taxes. So that's why I recommended Rob. I didn't really think about the GIS gentleman, but I thought that was a good one. But that's why I went to Rob. I figured that would be the most current one. As the property shifts, that all that information has to be updated quickly, where the GIS mapping seems to be lagging behind, not due to the effort, just so much information that he's got to get, into that program. So,
yeah, it was strange. A lot of the addresses that bounced, over 100 of the postcards, were Nantucket local addresses.
well, there's a lot of people have done this for HTC. You send out a certified letter and they won't touch it. They're like, no, but and then, it comes back, and I did one and it was 300 neighborhoods or 300 addresses on Nobody Farm Road. And a third of them, if not more, came back because they thought it was the courts or whatever. So yeah, it was just, it's the nature of the beast, I guess.
Okay. But I think we've beaten that beast to death right here. So Andrew, I had a question for you and for the commission. With your suggestion, more than 2 active area plan work groups working at the same time is discouraged. I would go further with that and say that only one of those 2 active work groups can be a new plan. We can't have 2 new plans going at once, not just for the load, because new plans are so much more intensive than updates. But new plans can take a long time.
Yep.
That could be a bottleneck to prevent updates from happening. So I would like to make sure that we do have that open channel. As we get more plans, there will be more updates, to make sure that plans can get updated without waiting 2 years in a queue as 2 new areas sort of figure it out. I don't know how you or the commissioners feel about that suggestion.
I agree with it. So.
Any other comments on that, or any other suggestions for what we see on the screen here so far? And again, this is a draft that we will fill out some more. Okay, I'm not seeing any. The last update in this section, other committee updates and reports. Do you have anybody who wants to make a report? I don't see any there, and that is fine considering the hour. Our next meeting will be Monday, May 22nd. That is pushed back a week, I think, as previously noted. The May 15th date is just 1 week after town meeting, and we thought it would be helpful to have a little bit more space there. And then if there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Roll call vote. Seth Engelbart.
Aye.
Excuse me. Wendy Hudson.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Jerry Rector.
Aye.
Joe Topham.
Aye.
John Trudell.
Aye.
Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all. We'll see you at town meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Good night.
night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.